We became the first team in major professional sports to do over $1 billion of COI. A great way to become a millionaire from being a billionaire is owning a sports team. At that point, it was the second largest naming rights deal ever done. Within several months of coming on board, we won the lottery for getting LeBron James. It was the most peaceful mob. That's the only way I can describe it, mob I'd ever seen. And folks, it's modern day Beirut here.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 4 of the Path to the Pros podcast. Super excited to kick off the new season. Do feel like I am dusting the cobwebs off a little bit, so we'll see how this goes. But I am super pumped to introduce our guest today. A very successful exec in the industry, Len Komoroski, senior advisor, investor, and very good at what he does. So, Len, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure having you on.
Samir, great to be on, and look forward to the discussion.
Good stuff. All right. So, Len, question I always love to kick these conversations off with. If you can take us back to your earlier days, how you first broke into the world of sports and that journey there. Where did it all begin for you?
So I'm a native of Pittsburgh, Cleveland's favorite city, and I went to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh. I was I think like a lot of kids in college, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was a good writer. So I would write for newspapers, so the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and other newspapers, and did stringing for Associated Press, covering Pittsburgh Penguins games and others. So Duquesne University is right in downtown Pittsburgh. And I thought I might get into advertising or some other segment there. And so I get to, my senior year of college, and it's like, wow, in 8 months, I'm going to need a job. And at that point, people now, it's sports marketing is prevalent, right? There was really only one sports management program in the entire country. It was Ohio University professor Charles Higgins, and it was more recreational based. So sports marketing, as we knew, didn't exist. So there was an arena, then the Civic Arena, where the Penguins played, about a block away from Duquesne, right in downtown. And there was this indoor soccer team that was coming back to town, the Pittsburgh Spirit. Edward J. DeBartolo, or the DeBartolo family. Now, Jed is actually a grandson of him who owns the 49ers. The 49ers were part of his empire. But they were coming back into town, and I just figured, hey, I'll walk across the street, see if they need an intern, any help, right? And so I go to the front desk. They basically waved me back to the where the Spirit were, and I was they didn't even interview me. They just parked me at a coffee table with 11 other interns, and interns were unpaid at that point. You just basically volunteered, and so I was part of a whole group of people who helped out. And early on, so they're asking people, hey, I need somebody to make copies here. We need people, a lot of grunt work, right? And I would just shoot my hand up right away and say, I'll do it, and make 1,000 copies, right? Or they need the toner changed in the copier. I'll do it. I don't know how to do it. I'll figure it out, right? Whatever they asked me to do, I figured I'm going to do it with a great attitude, with a smile on my face, and do the best job I could. And it was funny because a lot of the other interns or quote unquote interns at the table saying, I didn't go to college to make copies. I didn't go to, to do all this grunt work. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And it was great, because what I found is that they found, what people are looking for, somebody who get a job done, have a good attitude, and works hard. And it's amazing. They started giving me a lot more stuff. So I was a PR intern. And concurrent with this, I walked over to Three River Stadium, was where the Pirates played. And I did the same thing, volunteered to intern there. So my senior year, I was going between the Civic Arena and the Spirit, and then also with the Pirates. Now, the Pirates were at that juncture, sort of a moribund organization. It was a lot more conservative. This indoor soccer thing, people didn't know if a soccer ball at that point was blown up or stuffed. And this indoor, you're playing with dasher boards and players running. So it was just anything goes. And I had a PR director who liked to do other stuff. And so I was doing all of his work. I was doing a lot of his work. I was writing press releases. I was contacting the media. I was setting up the press box. I was doing a lot of different things. And so I came to just love it. I'd be, frankly, I'd be there till 2 in the morning doing stuff because it was just getting things done. I was so passionate about it. There was a security guard, Nate, the security guard at gate 2, and he would go, "What the hell are you doing up there?" So it was, it was like I said, just so much fun. So I was very fortunate. I found my passion, this is what I wanted to do. And so I graduated from Duquesne. uh, 18% unemployment in Pittsburgh at that time. The steel industry had collapsed.
Wow.
When I finished those internships, there weren't any jobs available at that point, and then I ended up working for a Thrift Drug as a writer. I found a job, my path there briefly, and I was working and I ended up working with the CEO because early on I knew how to use computers when they were just getting started, and so I was working with him on his 5-year plan. I'd only been there for like 3 months, and I come back to my desk, and there was two messages. One from the general manager of the Spirit, and the other from the PR director. And I called the PR director up first, and he said, "Hey, I've been fired, and I recommended you for the job." And then the general manager, who I knew, Chris Wright is his name, actually. Chris is another terrific friend, industry veteran, was the CEO of Minnesota United MLS team here. But Chris had offered me the job, and so I started out as a PR director for the Pittsburgh Spirit of the Major Indoor Soccer League back in its heyday. And so yeah, so that was how I got my foot in the door.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this about the arena. So at this point, Edward J. DeBartolo was way ahead of his time. We take for granted now in sports about owners who have master leases on their venue with multiple teams or all that, right? This is
Yeah.
a point in time. I'm talking about 1982, right? This is going back a few years. This is a time when in the industry you were a tenant in a publicly owned building. That wasn't the case with the Bardlow. He had the Spirit, the soccer team. He had the Penguins. He managed all the events. He had his own food and beverage concession company. He had his own ticketing company, Ticketron, which ultimately was acquired by Ticketmaster. He had his own media production company. We produced our own radio and television when nobody was doing that. And he had the Baltimore Skipjacks American Hockey League team. He had ultimately a United States Football League team, the Pittsburgh Maulers. And then he had the 49ers. We had a sweet campaign, the Sweets of San Francisco. I remember that. And then he had Thistledown Racetrack and Louisiana Downs Racetrack, and was trying to ultimately buy a baseball team. So I was really fortunate enough to be in a candy store. And so even though I was working for this indoor soccer team, and once you're there, you not only I was doing PR, but I was doing sales, I was doing marketing, but I was just volunteering I was doing other events at the arena. I was working on Penguins games. I was working in arena boxing events. I mean, I was doing broadcast production for the Maulers with Jim Kelly and the Houston Gamblers coming into town, or whatever it may be. It
Yeah.
was really a great place to get into the business.
And growing up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the time, how big was the local community, your family, friends, school in sports, and how much of that kind of drove you to want to work in the industry? Was that something that was quite intentional about what you wanted to do, or how did that play out?
So I always played a lot of sports, and was a big sports fan. I was a 4-year letterman for Duquesne's tennis team. So I played a lot of tennis, played a lot of deck hockey, which is basically street hockey. And we used to tour all over the country playing. In fact, for some of your older listeners, we played against Ricky Vive's team. Ricky Vive was an NHL player, Dino Ciccarelli. During tournaments, they would play that in the off season. We had a guy on our team for a tournament, Marty McSorley, who was a teammate of Wayne Gretzky's, but also played for the Penguins. But so I was always played sports. Never really had thought about it as a business opportunity. or the business side of it until I started interning. And then once I started interning, it was like, this is exactly what I want to do. One quick step back on that. So indoor soccer at that time was Major Indoor Soccer League was really remarkable. In fact, the payrolls of these MISL teams were about 60-70% of an NBA team at that juncture.
Wow.
And a lot of great friends in the industry, people, titans of the industry, who were involved, which we'll get a chance to talk about. But there were MISL teams. Tim Lewicki and team, they were selling out in Kansas City. The St. Louis Steamers were doing 18,000 a game. The Cleveland Force went up to events up at Richfield with 20,000 people at the arena. We actually outdrew the Penguins at that point. Penguins were not so good. We were doing about 8,500 a game. They were doing about 6,800. So it was a great place to be. But the other thing I'll just say about indoor soccer is we were people didn't know what it was. So lights out introductions, fog machines, laser light shows, pyro, dance teams, mascots, all that stuff, shows at halftime. We were doing that way in advance of anybody else. And that was really a big part of the DNA of when you saw what that happened with the NBA. And we could talk a little bit about that as we go forward here. But that was another great thing about having to learn to sell something that people don't necessarily know they even want. Right. And then also the total entertainment experience to try to create, fan avidity.
And so what I'm taking from that, Len, being a huge soccer guy myself, is soccer paved the way for the rest of the sports out here in the US to entertain and understand how to host. In your experience?
Well, I'll flash forward to that a bit. So and you're asking about my journey. So I was fortunate enough to be with the Spirit. We went through our whole process. The trouble with the MISL is they did not have a salary cap. So you had incredible players, but even though their revenues were growing, their payrolls were going exponentially higher. I mean, we had phenomenal players, but there was no cost containment. And as a result, the league suffered and started to lose franchises. So and I'll take one quick step back on that because this was something my parents always supported me with whatever I wanted to do. I was at Thrift Drug and a writer. I was working with the CEO. I'm like, I'm 22 years old. I'm working with the CEO, working on a 5-year strategic plan because I was sort of the person who had to do this whole place, knew how to work the computer to be able to do the word processing. And, this place had a pension, solid, ultimately now it's part of CBS. And I can remember getting the offer from the Spirit. So less money, less security, no pension, no benefits are almost non-existent, right? And who knows if they'd be in business 5 months from now, let alone 5 years from now. And I remember my parents going, "You really want to do?" Questioning my sanity. Questioning my sanity. And I followed my passion, which I always look at Robert Frost, the road less traveled is sort of an axiom for a lot of how I try to live my life. But you're right. From indoor soccer, I went to the Spirit. Ultimately ended up folding because of again these economic matters, getting the payroll getting out of control. And my favorite team growing up, and still one of my favorite teams, the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I'm a huge hockey fan. Played a lot of, like I said, deck hockey. And I got a job with them. They offered me a job, and I was working in PR and community relations, set up their community relations department. And then Chris Wright, my friend, got the GM position for the Minnesota Strikers, who were owned by Joe Robbie Stadium, Miami Dolphins, now Hard Rock Stadium. Right. And Chris offered me an opportunity to be his number 2, his assistant GM, which at an young age would be like the exposure to everything. So I made the road trip to Minnesota, and I was aware of Minnesota because when I was on the PR crew for the Spirit, I went everywhere, and I just remember running tape at Five Below in Minnesota during January. So we went there. My future wife made the trek And Denise, she was a saint, followed me up, and we had a lot of fun with them. They struggled financially as well, so this whole league was ready to capsize, and I ended up getting a job with the Miller Brewing Company sports marketing arm in out of Chicago, which was a terrific experience. So I worked for I had 8 states, 2 regions, but I was working with Major League Baseball, NFL, heck, my first NASCAR and NHRA events ever, all those type of things. And what we did is work relationships with sports teams, leverage that to sell beer, work on the national network. Heck, I worked with Bob Lanier and Dave Cowens back then. They had the Taste Great, Less Filling campaign, and just a lot of great stuff. And then, this opportunity came up for this startup team in Minnesota. I was contacted by a great friend of mine, John Thomas, JT, and I knew each other well from Minnesota. He was up there, but JT went on to become the president of the Minnesota North Stars, then the Dallas Stars, and the Houston Rockets, and the Sacramento Kings. Just a terrific person. And another friend in the industry, Tim Lewicki. So Tim was, made the jump from the Kansas City Comets to head up sales and marketing for the Timberwolves. And Buffy Philippel from Teamwork Consulting had placed him there. And so we were the first 3 executives, if you want to put it that way, for the Timberwolves. We were a startup franchise. The NBA had expanded by 4 teams. So it was us, Orlando, Charlotte, Miami. We were basically our owners, Marvin Harv Wolfenson, owned Northwest Health Swim and Racket Clubs, which is now Lifetime Fitness. But they owned these racket clubs, and we operated out of a conference room initially at one of their health clubs. And ultimately, it was just unbelievable. At a very young age, all of 27, we were starting up an NBA franchise, name, office, arena, all this type of stuff.
It's incredible.
And so an incredible learning ground. And Tim is a savant, as you know it, in terms of our space. JT was incredible, especially one of the best salespeople I've ever worked with, and just relationship people. And we built that from scratch. And you asked about the entertainment aspect. So we opened our first season in the Metrodome while the Target Center is being built. We still have the all-time NBA attendance record, over 24,000 a game. We would get up to 40,000 for games. So if you think about a Final Four type setup, that was our setup for our games at the Metrodome, was where the Vikings played, where the Twins played, Minnesota Gophers football. And so we come from indoor soccer. So, and I was doing, in addition to I was doing corporate partnerships and the like, but I was also heading up the game presentation.
Yeah.
And I would call the games. And so we did what we knew, Tim and I knew, which is, and JT knew because he worked with us in Minnesota with the Strikers. And that was lights out introductions, pyro, fog machines, laser light shows, mascot dancing team, crazy halftime shows. We had Michael Jackson impersonator. I mean, we did everything we did indoor soccer, right? David Stern, I remember David Stern calling us up and going, "What the blank are you guys doing in Minnesota?" Because at this point, halftime in the NBA was rolling out the ball court at half court and sort of your collegiate lights up introduction. And
right.
So the MISL doesn't get enough credit for what it's done, but all we did was do what we had been doing, which is this total entertainment experience, and just wacky stuff. We did a lot of movie clips. I mean, it was crazy. So, and we were educating a new audience to the NBA, because the NBA had not been in Minnesota since the Minneapolis Lakers left in the 50s. So that was an unbelievable experience. And, I think just really helped really shape a lot of my, my future, just based on all that we were doing and the way we were approaching the corporate community with large integrated partnerships, 7-figure partnerships, which and it certainly in that market hadn't been done, and which was relatively unique in our industry. Needs analysis, building integrated, not just here's a sign or whatever, but really we had fully integrated partnerships back then, and just really grew the industry. Had a chance to have a front seat in terms of the
Yeah.
evolution of the NBA as well. So it was a fun time, but long-winded way to get there. But I'll show you that path. That's where the
Yeah.
MISL came in and really was a forerunner to what we now take for granted in our industry.
Doing all of that, I mean, the one thing that just was playing in my mind as you was talking through everything there was 27 years old, going and building pretty much a franchise, right? An NBA franchise. That experience at that age is something a lot of people would love to be involved in, right here today, right now. Would you say that that was your first, pinch me moment of, kid growing up, sports oriented guy, went to college, played sports, big Pittsburgh fan. And all of a sudden you're 27 years old and you're building an NBA franchise. That must have been, did you ever take a kind of step back and just think, whoa, this is pretty crazy?
Well, I will tell you at the time, and then Bob Stein was our president. Bob was the son-in-law of Marvin Harv Wolfenson. So I want to make sure to mention Bob too, because Bob was a great person to work with. And Bob sort of let these, the inmates run the asylum a bit here with the Tim and all of his everything we were doing, and JT and myself. But I will say this: we were so consumed with everything that we were doing, every little aspect of it. But it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, all we knew is everything we need to get done, which was a mountain, and building a team, building things that really hadn't been done before. We had a corporate services team, which really not only did you sell the partnership, but how do we fulfill it and optimize it, maximize it, and things like group sales that were new at that juncture, ticket sales, all those different elements there. But having looked back, and even Tim and I have talked about this, and JT, about how fortunate we were to be, because Tim's, he's a JT and Tim, they're only a couple years older than me, and we were this young group to be entrusted with a startup,
Right. Big
working with a
task.
startup of an NBA team, and but it was such a fledgling time for the sports industry and sports management. Like I was telling you, sports management. So I didn't mention this, but um, when I was with the Spirit, I would go out and get interns. So I'm a PR director. I'm getting interns, and there was a sports marketing professor at Robert Morris College named Bill Sutton. And so Bill, I would get my interns from Bill, and Bill's one of the legends in sports marketing.
Right.
Bill has just done amazing things. You may have already had him on a podcast, but Bill is terrific. And so I was getting a pipeline of interns from Bill. But at that point, Robert Morris didn't have a sports management program. There was only, like I said, the one at OU. So again, our whole industry has just come light years over these last 40 plus years. Back then, we just happened to be at the tip of the spear. We were very fortunate to be at a time where it was just starting to blow up,
Yeah.
and had the latitude, basically, and freedom to do a lot of things that maybe now would be a lot more bureaucracy to fight through to be able to do. We just were doing what we knew from our MISL days, and the total entertainment concept, at a time where people were more sports focused
Yeah.
versus the breadth of the customer experience. What's the experience like? And that was something that was necessary for survival in the MISL, because otherwise people wouldn't give you the time of day.
Right. And 1996, you get a call from what was then NFL, I guess, biggest sport in the US, would you say at that time? I mean, I was born in 1994, so I just want to let you know that I was two at this time. But if you can share for some of the younger listeners, what was NFL like at that time of your life, and what was that opportunity like for you in making that transition?
Well, and just to bring it full circle, so I was at the Wolves, and there we had a NBA All-Star game. We had a terrific run. They were going through an ownership transition, um, and there was all kinds of things happening. We were at a prospect of moving to New Orleans, and it was just crazy. But I got contacted Buffy Philippel, who from Teamwork, with another opportunity. As a bridge, and it was with the Cleveland Lumberjacks of the International Hockey League, and this was someone to run that team. And the thing about it was the IHL was a hybrid between the AHL and the NHL. We played in NBA buildings, sort of tried to become this tweener league. And my goal was to own a team. And so the owner of that team was open to an exit strategy if I could try to put together a group. So I decided to make that plunge. And while I'm there trying to do that, that league goes off in the deep end. There was a strike with the NHL. And all of a sudden they thought, hey, let's take on the NHL. And now player payrolls were doubling, tripling, even for the same players. Their economics were collapsing. And I got a call from the Eagles, Philadelphia Eagles, and a terrific team member who worked for me in Minnesota, Karen Levine, I guess, had recommended me to Jeffrey Lurie and Joe Banner at the Eagles, and had some great discussions with them. And at that point in the NFL, going out there, the NFL was had tremendous fan demand still going back at that time. But our front office, we had a person working in our box office. We had there was a sales rep, a services person there, one person, someone working on the suite level. There was like a handful of people working on the entirety of the business. Wow. And so anyhow, ultimately, I get hired to head my whole proposition to Jeffrey and Joe Banner. Joe and Jeffrey were like boyhood friends going back from Boston. They got this NFL team. And my thing was, I put together a plan and said, if I'm able to build an NBA style front office, that I would come. And they signed off on it. So, we're building out departments that didn't exist, merchandising, marketing, community relations, just all these different, the building out media beyond just basic media, but how do we, in terms of earned media, build that scope greater, our corporate partnership department, our ticketing and premium area, all these things everything was new and right. Building on a terrific team. The funny part about it was, so while I was in Cleveland transitioning, I was trying to get information prior to starting, and there was a sales rep at the Eagles named Scott O'Neill, and so Scott was my go-to for, hey, I need this data, give me this and everything else. And so Scott, who's phenomenal, so I get there, and so I have Scott he had come from the New Jersey Nets where he had worked as a sales rep there, and just had just a phenomenal run with that crew. We had an incredible staff, been able to bring on people like Jason Ganella. Jason now works for the UFL. Chris Heck. Chris was hired Chris on the way up to training camp. He'll tell you that story. We had right up there. We wanted a training camp it used to just be training camp, right? But we turned it into a village. We had a hospitality village. We had a major merchandising set up. Steve Strawbridge, who now runs Pop Warner, is the CEO of Pop Warner Football. Steve was our merch guy. Rob Alberino, we brought out Rob in created a Eagles television network. He came from NFL Films. Rob now is a senior executive with the Chiefs. Just an incredible setup. So we had all this hospitality. We sold naming rights to training camp with Allegheny, with the from a hospital network. So just a whole laboratory there. And
what a crew, by the way. What a great set of people who have all, individually, yourself included, gone on to achieve great things.
No, we had a blessed to be able to have great people, bring great people on board. Dave Rowan. Dave went on to become chief operating officer of the Philadelphia Union, and then for the National Lacrosse League. Yeah, so we just had we had an amazing group. And I think the great part about that experience that was helpful for me from the very beginning, in conversations with Jeffrey and Joe, is we needed a new stadium. Veteran Stadium was beat, and beat is being kind to it. And we also needed a practice facility. And so our practice facilities, when I got there, and we had Ray Rose as our coach initially, and Ray was on his way out. We were awful team that year. I think we have 3-13. We rallied to finish 3-13. We were getting dust. Our home opener, I think we lost to the Seattle Seahawks 48-0. I just remember that. Wow. And that we lost 2 games on Monday Night Football. This is that first year was that last year was where Ray was moving out, but we lost to the 49ers, which I don't know if this goes way back for people, but we were losing so badly, and we didn't control security at the stadium at that point. The city controlled it. Someone managed to get a bottle rocket in the stadium and shot a bottle rocket across the stadium into the upper deck. And by the second half, everybody had left, which was fortunate. But I just remember Al Michaels on the Monday Night Football saying, "Folks, it's modern day Beirut here at Veterans Stadium." And then we lost I remember losing to the Cowboys on Monday Night Football as well. We got smoked by them. And that was famous because Deion Sanders returned a punt return for touchdown and ran the last 15 yards backwards into the end zone. It was just something. But so we had nowhere to go but up, right? And our venue scenario, so our practice facility, and again, our practice facility was in the bowels of the stadium. So our offices for the team were in the bowels of the stadium. They used to then go outside, use the same locker room, obviously, for the games they had, walk across a asphalt parking lot where the cars parked to a chain link fence field outside in the parking lot of the vet. So they had to walk, I don't know, like 150 yards to this chain link fence single field. That was the practice facility. It got to a point, remember we were recruiting Dana Stubblefield, who was then a premier defensive tackle. And it got to the point that for recruits, we wouldn't bring him to the stadium, their practice facility. He signed with the Redskins. At that point, they had practice facilities dedicated. So we worked to build terrific practice facilities, the NovaCare complex, which Michael Graves was the architect, and it was spectacular. And it still is. It still holds up as one of the great practice facilities that really helped to change the trajectory. We did a terrific naming rights deal with NovaCare, who's still the partner there. And at that point, we set a new benchmark in the industry. It was, I think it was $66 million, 20-year deal. So at that point was beyond anything that anybody else had done. And then we were out building this new stadium and working through that and having the chance to go through the public-private process with Joe, with every aspect that was going on. And we still had 10 years to go on our lease. So the difficulty of getting politicians this is usually somebody else's issue down the road, 10 years down the road, to move more quickly, to rip up the lease for building a new stadium was a Herculean task, but ultimately we were able to prevail. And then going through the design process, and we worked with NBBJ, Dan Meese and Ron Turner, and it was, how do we create a venue that's not just your rote circular stadium? So it was a broken bowl concept where you had different unique elements. We had social zones. It was phenomenal for someone like me to be able to be able to go through a process like that. And Jeffrey and Joe were terrific to allow me to lean in with things like, how do we create Utah Street? All these things that we saw in other places. So the Orioles had Utah Street. So we had this whole Head House Plaza, which, live music and, all these things which were foreign at this point to certainly in the NFL specter. And then, social zones and the different elements that we did with, just with different hospitality and premium and elements. And then The other part of it too is from my days in Minnesota, from a corporate philosophy end, those fully integrated partnerships. And the other key element that we really learned a lot more about is contractually obligated income. We had a financing relationship with our private debt on the stadium where COI, or contractually obligated income. And what I mean by that, especially for the younger folks out there, is you think about a naming rights deal and it's over 20 years, right? Every year that income is contractually obligated. So that's a number. The same with any entitlements, the name of the gates, any club areas, all that type of stuff, all your corporate partnerships. You think about suites and premium and all those different areas. So we set out to do new benchmarks in our industry. We became the first team in major professional sports to do over $1 billion of COI.
Wow.
At that point, we had done the second largest naming rights deal. I remember working with John Bosch, then the CEO of Lincoln Financial Group, now still Lincoln Financial Field. John was terrific to work with, another Pittsburgher, and Duke Kaner. So great guy, and that partnership at that point was the second largest naming rights deal ever done, behind Enron Stadium at that juncture in Houston, and we were able to achieve at a high level. The thing that I will also say from the Eagles, and we did all this type of stuff too, is we had a chance to really go after it from a total entertainment experience end. So I think Joe and Jeffrey gave me latitude for our team to really lean in there. So I can still recall, this was early on. We did the introductions with the pyro and fog machines, and we introduced a mascot swoop. We had our cheerleading squad. We sort of built them on to have a little bit more pizzazz with what we had going on. We had a Monday Night Football game, which we did like this, and this was even back in Ray's tenure, and it was like, and we had Michael Buffer in to do the introduction of the game, and it was just unbelievable. And I remember Ray going, "What is this, the effing Super Bowl?" Yeah, I prepped them. This is what we're going to be doing, when it all took place. But anyways, I think even that was a big part of this as we continue to build. And the great part about, you mentioned about the history of the NFL, there was just more about history that, and Jeffrey Lurie, so a lot of credit with Jeffrey. He's brought stability to a team that had none. There had been so many ownership changes with the Eagles over the years, and we had a terrific box office guy, Leo Carlin, and Leo's since passed, but he's legendary. Even when I was there, he had been in the industry for 40 years by that point. And, I always marveled at other NFL teams, at that point, the then Redskins had the Cheer for the Redskins song, and the Chiefs had their song, Baltimore, all these there are some different elements, sort of collegial elements with it. And we had none of that. In fact, early, getting there, the Phillies ran our game presentation.
Right.
The city ran our stadium. It was like we didn't have control. All these third parties had everything. So we brought all that in-house, built the team that run it in-house. But I was sitting down with Leo and I was saying, man, these teams have some great historical elements. And he goes, "Oh yeah, we had a band, and he showed me pictures from the 60s. And so we sort of formed a pep band, from the Eagles. And then he pulled out and showed me this fight song that the Eagles had called, Fly Eagles Fly. And I was like, well, where did that go? And it just disappeared. And so we had our pep band record Fly Eagles Fly. Now, granted, when we started this, and this is with Andy Reid's first year, and Andy's terrific. Andy came in, and we had this resurgence, Donovan McNabb, and so we go from this team with 3 wins, and I think we won 5, starting to work our way back. So we had this whole thing worked out where we had, we played Fat Boy Slim at the segment right after the touchdown before he kicked the extra point, and then after the extra point went to Fly Eagles Fly, and at first, it's had to catch back on again, but as the team got better, and now it's just like gospel.
Yeah.
And then we also incorporated Rocky. We had this history of film with Rocky, and we had our kickoff before a kickoff. We had Rocky, where he makes the run up the steps to to the art
Yeah.
museum, and right before kickoff, and just getting people just amped up and cutting
Yeah.
players with it. And so all these little things, these touch points to just add to the experience. But again, it was just this lump of clay, which again, I was just very fortunate to be at a franchise at a point where it was just an ember. Jeffrey had just gotten the team within the 2 years prior, and given that support to be able to really, to lean in and do all that and build a great team, and at a time when the NFL was really starting to take off, and now it's just I'm stunned. It's a
Yeah.
juggernaut.
What a journey. Season 1, you said 3 wins in your first
Three,
season
yeah,
there?
3 wins here where I meant to rally. So Bobby Hoying was our quarterback, and Bobby, was at Ohio State, and Bobby had challenged through that year, and we were on path to score the least amount of points per game in NFL history. I think we were averaging like 8.5 points a game.
Crazy.
And so for the last 3 games, Coy Detmer came in as a backup to play, and we won 2 of our last 3 to rally and get the 3 wins. So ironically, that set us up for Donovan in the draft, and Andy wanted him all along, and the Browns were coming back that
Yeah.
year, and they wanted, so they had declared they're going to have to draft Tim Couch. So that just started that whole era, the
Right.
the McNabb era, which was a terrific one.
The rebuild. What if your next hire could shift your entire season? What if you never had to settle for second best ever again? In the world of sports and entertainment, pace is everything. You don't have to sift through weak resumes or wait months to fill senior roles. That's where your partnership with a global talent partner comes in. As a Financial Times fastest growing company 3 years running, when you partner with Forsyth Barnes, you'll tap into a global talent network built specifically for the fast-paced world of sports and entertainment. Having placed talent for some of the biggest leagues, venues, and brands in the industry, you can connect with world-class candidates fast and onboard the top talent that you need to succeed. 98% of roles filled. 92% of candidates staying in post over 2 years. Delivery guaranteed. Forsyth Barnes, your global talent partner, disrupting the recruitment industry. Book your free hiring consultation now at www.forsythbarnes.com and see just how your competitors are staying ahead. But what a journey, like I say, to have joined at that time and have left, 7 years, 6-7 years later. What must have been a hell of a ride. Which, talking of good journeys, good rides, what happened next, Len?
So anyways, it's 2003, Eagles, we got everything cranking, we've got this the practice facility, the stadium coming online. We did, incredible numbers financially, the billion with the COI with the Eagles. And I don't know, there's just always something a bit in me in terms of like the journey of taking something or working with something that is at a low ebb, and how do you build it back up? And that's so Buffy Philippell again, teamwork, had contacted me about an opportunity, the president's opportunity with the Cavaliers, and I was well familiar with the Cavs from my 2 years with the Lumberjacks, who were a tenant in the building. And what I didn't share about the Lumberjacks is I had a phenomenal team. I had hired Kerry Bubbles there. Kerry, I knew when I was up in the Timberwolves. He was working for a CBA team, the Wichita Falls Texans, and I remembered him when I got there. So I brought Kerry in. I had Tracy Merrick, who's a marketing intern. Tracy had up there. So, but at that point in time, at the arena, we took this IHL team, which was nothing, to make it a thing in Cleveland. And, we were on weekends doing 14, 15,000 people. We had the whole total entertainment concept. We were loving what we were doing in Philadelphia, but it was an opportunity to build out. It was the same opportunity. So like to give the latitude to build out a team. And so at that point, Cavs were last in attendance, last in revenue, worst team, secondary concert venue in the market, the Wolstein Center, where the Cleveland State was, which was 3 blocks away, a little by 15,000. They were the top concert venue in the market. So we had nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I took the leap there. Gordon Gunn was the owner, and Gordon, just a phenomenal guy. Gordon had given me a lot of latitude with what's happened. And then, as fortune would have it, within several months of coming on board, we won the lottery for getting LeBron James. And that became an accelerant, a bottle rocket for just really helping affect change. And so organizationally, had to make a significant amount of changes, because unfortunately it was a culture where people were saying can't be done, tried that, it doesn't work. It was not a sales culture. It was very much more of an operational type culture. The salespeople were looked at like dirty words. So
yeah,
had to come in, had a number there. So I had a VP of sales and Chad Estes. And Chad's spectacular. Chad's another actually worked for Buffy in Chad's a native here of Aurora, Ohio. Brought in Carrie Buboltz. Carrie, somebody who worked with me before and who knew, sort of philosophically how we wanted to do things and help accelerate there. Tracy Merrick brought her in to be our head up our marketing, sort of put Tad Carper, different seat on the bus, went from marketing to communications. Now Tad now heads up communications for the Cowboys, and really just was able to build a phenomenal team here. So I've been really blessed in that. Some for a game presentation end, hired, we got Johnny and Amanda Greco. They weren't a husband and wife back then, but Johnny came in to do our back of house production for our games. Johnny now Shine Entertainment, but Johnny's legendary in the industry. So he had been with us, and then WWE hired him to reinvent their arena experience. Kerry hired him when Kerry went to become CEO of the Golden Knights, to that whole 7-minute, 8-minute introduction they do with the Golden Knights, the whole game presentation there. But MSG, others, but he has his own company now. And then Amanda, we had hired from the Utah Jazz to be our game director and call the games. And they soon went on to become husband and wife, but just reinvent our game experience in total. All I can say is I've been blessed to have just had a phenomenal group of leaders over the years that have been able to bring on board and be part here. So I look at that VP of sales position. So first VP sales I had was Chad Estes, and then I went out. Then Mike Andraco. Mike stepped into that role. Mike Toman, then after Drake's left, was able to get Mike Toman, who was a Cleveland native. At that point, he was in Charlotte, to come on board as our VP of sales. And Mike happened to bring an inside sales rep named Nick Barlage here. And Nick went on to play leadership roles in sales for us, and ultimately went to the Phoenix Suns. But and then I can just look at, in community relations, Colleen Garrity, brought in Colleen from Colorado, and she totally reshaped her community relations, and she's now, a force on the player side. She's been incredible there. But Brad Sims, Chief Revenue Officer, ultimately at time Brad. And I remember sitting with Brad. He got this opportunity for the MLS. He said, well, I don't know, MLS, should I? I said, here's where the industry's going, right? Here's where sports, and you're going to be in New York, Man City. You're going to be building a new stadium, and he's just blown it out of the park, with everything that's happening there. So, I can't, Mika White. I mean, just like on and on and on. Just I've been very fortunate to have just incredible people come through here. I think we're very fortunate with Dan Gilbert to have the support and the vision about how do we be the best at what we want to be, and having the resources that we had, and just a drive to be the best every single day, the best fan experience, the best team, best facilities. And then here, we had a chance to go through the whole transformation process of the arena. I'm here at Rocket Arena right now, but it took what was, in getting here early on, just coming off of Lincoln Financial Field, we had a venue which had good bones, good bowl. The fan experience sucked. We had tight concourses. no vestibule area to process people coming in, so you're waiting outside in the cold. Our points of sale were limited. No social or neighborhood to engage with. And we got a chance to remedy all that with the transformation of this arena. And now it feels like a brand new arena. It's just absolutely spectacular. And not only that, then really converted into one of the top entertainment venues in the world. We've been in Polestar in the top 30 a number of times, and became a dominant player in the concert space. All the NCAA events used to be at the Wolstein Center. Now they're here. Got the Rock Hall induction ceremonies here. We have a lot of big flagship events that take place here now, and it's become, like I said, a major force and the largest driver of economic activity of any venue in our region. So
Incredible.
it's been incredible, and just to close that off. So I about, I don't know, 8 years ago to Dan, I said, look, I'm not going to do this forever. As far as that goes, in terms of having been in this role for quite a while, and Nick, who had been with us before and did a terrific job. So Nick was at that point with the Phoenix Suns. Was fortunate enough to get Nick back here as my number two, and just get a chance to really set the runway for him to ultimately for the transition. So I had stepped away as CEO about 3 years now ago, and I'm a senior advisor for the Cavs and REG now. But what it's enabled us to do are a lot of things that we've always wanted to do. But when you're in that role, you are definitely 365, 24/7. We're an arena with 200 plus ticketed events, 1,500 private events. We have multiple teams. We're fortunate enough to go out during that time frame. I always loved hockey, and convinced Dan to be able to get the Monsters. We brought the Monsters in and built them up to one of the premier franchises in the AHL. We were able to persuade Dan about being an early team with the G League and with the Charge, and now they've become our team here's done a terrific job in blowing that up, and we built a new practice facility. Have another one coming online. So just a lot of great things that have happened here over the years. And then I think the one thing when we did the transformation of the arena, I mentioned about contractual obligated income. Our team was able to generate, and Brad will tell you this too, but the third highest amount of COI in NBA history for a new or renovated venue at that point, only behind the MSG renovation and the Chase Center new venue. And Rick Welch did a terrific job with everything out there. So just a lot of great things, and we're sort of really now enjoying I guess you want to say another chapter here with a lot of different stuff going on.
We'll come back to that chapter in 1 second. I think there's one thing that I think any Cavs fan would love to hear is going from being the worst team in a couple of different categories that you mentioned when you first joined in 2003 to 2016. Something relatively big happened that year, I think it's fair to say, ending a 52-year championship drought for major sports in Cleveland, I believe it is. LeBron James, obviously, the impact that he had in developing and taking that team there, the first team in NBA Finals history to recover. Was it a 3-1 series deficit and turn around and win the title?
Samir, I can take you through that whole thing. So it was, well, first of all, you're absolutely spot on. So 52-year drought, the largest drought for any market with three major professional teams. Obviously we have the Major League Baseball, we got the NFL, and the last championship was the '64 Browns in the pre-Super Bowl era, an NFL title, right? So, so anyhow, as you probably know, and we got sick of seeing it, ESPN had a reel that they loved to show all the time. It showed all of Cleveland's near misses. In fact, Cleveland, we were the only market that I know of that had, if you go to Wikipedia and you look up the shot is defined as Michael Jordan's shot that, he made to knock the Cavs out of the playoffs. Back when the Price, Doherty, and Nance era, when the Cavs had a great team, they just couldn't get past Jordan. The fumble, Ernest Miner's fumble that cost the Browns was in the AFC Championship. The drive, same thing. John Elway, 98-yard drive that won the championship. They again knocked the Browns out. So Red Right 88, we had Jose Mesa blown save with the then Indians against the Marlins and lost. So they had this reel of all these near misses of Cleveland. It was like a loser reel that they just showed over and over again. And is it going to be again? And so we get into those playoffs, and to set the stage there even further, the Warriors set a NBA record for wins that still stands to this day. They broke the Bulls record, right? And 73 wins. Steph Curry becomes the first unanimous MVP in NBA history.
Yeah.
Unanimous vote. So they've got this juggernaut of team. They'd beaten us the year before, and they were an incredibly heavy favorite. So we go into the playoffs. They have home court advantage. We're down, as you said, we're down 3-1. And it was amazing, just like this confluence of events. But our hockey team, the Monsters, were a I would call a miraculous mode, playoff mode. We weren't as strong of a team in the regular season, but we just went on this run, and we went all the way to the finals of the Calder Cup and won the championship. So Cavs lost, we're down 3-1. Monsters win the championship, sellout crowd, crazy, 1-0.
And this is simultaneous, right?
Simultaneous, going on at the same time. So we have that going on, and we won that game. And that was just this. And then our GM at the time, David Griffin, sent around this amazing email about why not us. And I remember us going out to at that point, 3-1 down. 32 teams in the NBA Finals had been down 3-1. Nobody had ever won.
Yeah.
Let alone a team like us who would have to win. We didn't have home court advantage, so we'd have to win the majority of those on the road against a historically great team, right? And so we end up winning, going out there, getting it back to our court, coming back and winning, and then have our own our own new shot, the block, LeBron's block, the stop. Kevin Love on Steph Curry at the end, just all of that to win, and the cathartic release in Cleveland. So we had at that juncture the largest NBA celebration in history with 1.3 million people, the sixth largest ever all time worldwide at that point. We found in downtown Cleveland's 300,000 plus people here. 1.3 million people. If you see the pictures, it's just our city was overwhelmed. I remember we went through this quick parade planning with our city, and they're like, this is going to be like a big St. Patrick's Day parade where they get 400,000 to 500,000 people, right? Well, it blew that away, and it was the most peaceful mob. That's the only way I can describe it. Mob I'd ever seen. Hot day. But people were literally, right here, we got the Interbelt Bridge and I-90. People they parked on the side of the highway just because nowhere to go because so many people were in downtown. But it was.
I'm looking at the pictures now online, and would urge anyone listening to just have a quick search because it looks absolutely incredible. I mean, chaos, but the best kind of chaos.
Peaceful chaos. We were very fortunate. Yeah. Like I said, our public officials were a bit overwhelmed, and I remember Dan, we were making our way, we were at Public Hall, and then there's the what they call the mall, the plaza, outdoor plaza, where we had the team ultimately there, and all the fans had hundreds of thousands right there. And so we stopped for a respite here at Public Hall. And I remember one of the top lieutenants or deputies for the police department, and Dan's asking, well, why are you so overwhelmed, in terms of staffing and how they were set up and everything else? He goes, Dan, we've never had a parade before. It's been obviously been 50 years.
Yeah.
We haven't had one for 50 years. So out of practice, I guess is the way to put it. But it was just incredible with having gone through all that, and just something terrific for Cleveland. And it's funny because there was such a run. Stipe Miocic, from UFC, he's a Clevelander firefighter. He had won in our building, first ever UFC event we had here earlier that year. And I remember we had Stipe up at our client events, and he'd have his belt. So Stipe won, then the Monsters won, then we won. And then, as it turned out, we had the Republican National Convention. We had been vying for the DNC and the RNC. We were fortunate enough to get one of them chose us, and that was the RNC. That was taking place in July. And they were incredible to work with because they need 2 months typically to get set up. They had never expected us. They had committed to us prior to LeBron coming back, and had never expected us to be an NBA final team, let alone go 7. So they had the most abbreviated, like 3+ weeks to build out this city for this RNC, which, if you remember at that point, people were expecting riots. It turned out to be a love letter to Cleveland. And it really was a seminal point in Cleveland. I was the chairman of Destination Cleveland, or CBB, at that point, and David Gilbert, we have a terrific president there. And we did a lot of research, just trying to measure people's opinions on Cleveland, both from the external and internal community. And we started out, 32% of Clevelanders, this is going back in 2012, wouldn't even recommend Cleveland. Only 32% of Clevelanders would recommend Cleveland to a friend. To give you an idea, most markets were in the 60s, and then markets like San Antonio were in the 80s. We were dead last of the top 50 markets. We measured that as we kept building the infrastructure and building the tone, and people didn't have pride in Cleveland or in Cleveland. By 16, that number had climbed in the 60s, and now we're in the 80s. But they attributed the Cavs' victory in 16, largely the 16, and then also that convention, as major points of changing their opinions of Cleveland. This is Clevelanders' opinion of Cleveland.
Right.
There's a lot of pride here, but just even actually believing this is something we would recommend people about. This is the place to be, and it's just continued on in that trajectory. So really a phenomenal experience, and I'm just very blessed to have been part of a championship and everything that comes with it.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's an incredible journey, an incredible story to work through there. But you mentioned, coming away from the full-time sports executive role. I think it's fair to say that over your career, Len, you've had a front row seat to some of the biggest shifts and changes in the sports industry. Some of the things you've been involved in recently, just for anyone who isn't aware. So March 2024, you co-led an investor group that acquired the Lake Erie Crushers, which you're so proudly representing today on your T-shirt there, which is obviously, for anyone who doesn't know, a professional baseball team based in Avon, Ohio. Sheffield United Football Club, January 2025 of this year, you became a board member and investor in the football team there. Again, co-led by COH Sports, a consortium over there with Steve Rosen and Helmi El-Turki. And last but certainly not least, April of this year, so only a few months back, he was appointed as a director of the Australian National Basketball League. So really taking that basketball experience internationally. Reason I share all that for anyone listening is, I think it's fair to say that it's quite a interesting hot moment right now for investment into sports globally. How would you define it for any current listeners? Because there's a bit of a full circle moment in there for you as well, right? You mentioned when I think you just joined the Cleveland Lumberjacks that you were thinking of or wanted to own a team, right? And you're now in a position where you've got a few different investment opportunities that you've been involved in. Just talk to us a little about that, and I guess your take on the current landscape for investment into sports on a global scale.
Well, I would just say, first of all, the opportunities are just unbelievable across the board. And you always get the question, are we at the peak? Is this the height? Is there any more? Well, I would just tell you that sports, I think this trajectory is just going to continue to grow. The appetite for sports, it's reality, it's live reality programming, the original reality programming. and the drama, just every aspect of it is the youth levels to the professional levels. And it's just going to continue to grow. And, we mentioned about my wife and I have always been big minor league baseball fans. We actually partnered with we were already partnered with Andy Appleby and the old Fort Wayne Wizards, Andy General Sports. Now Andy, a good friend from back in the Pistons days. And ultimately Andy had moved on with that. But this opportunity came up. We were approached here, and it's in the west side of Cleveland, and Major League Baseball, and I just use this because different spheres out there, but Major League Baseball had acquired affiliated minor league baseball about 5 years ago. And now what used to be ownership of a team, now there you get a license, a 10-year license. As part of that, they contracted by 42 teams from 162 teams down to 120. They used to have uncapped number of minor league players you could have in a system. Now they capped it. So a team like the Guardians would have 250, 260 players per, and now they're capped at 165. And so they created these 4 Major League Baseball partner leagues. So we're one of 4, the Frontier League. We're the largest and the oldest of the 4, Atlantic League, American Association, Pioneer League, and offloading some development, right? And so with that, there's a set price they can acquire our players for a set fee, but they get the data. We're on TrackMan data. They get the video, and they can scout the games and get these plays. So it's worked out terrifically well. And then the venue we have, we're in Avon, Ohio, as you mentioned, Lorain County. We have a turf field, and we're going to have over 200 events out there this year. We're going to go from 100,000 people to over 300,000 people. Any number. We have concerts, we have carnivals, we have any number of different, and then other things in addition to building on the Crushers. So it's a phenomenal space. Diamond Baseball Holdings has done a phenomenal job in rolling up teams in the affiliated space.
Yeah.
Very similar principles and practices can apply at the Major League Baseball partner league level, and we see a great opportunity there and look to keep evolving that. You mentioned about the English Football League, and Steve's a good friend of mine from YPO, Young Presidents Organization here in Cleveland, and Steve and Helmy leading the charge here for Sheffield United. And I've always been a huge fan of English soccer. Actually, on behalf of Dan, I went with the head of his family office, Rob Kramer, about 13, 14 years ago, and we looked at teams over there. And one of the teams we looked at was Sheffield United. And it just, the thing about English soccer is, and even the English Championship, which is the league just below the Premier League, and you have the whole promotion relegation thing, which I know we'll talk to the second there, but unfortunately, we played in the biggest game, and they call it the $300 million game in England, and we lost to Sunderland 2-1. If we would have won, we would have been promoted this past year. So we're going to try back again this coming year. But the potential there is just vast, and all the commercial things we've talked about there are still in, I would say 30, 40 years ago. It's like, for me, it's like almost like walking back into the Eagles, where you have more of this baseline group and how they go about things, or the commercial opportunity. I think we have a good team there of people, but now how do we evolve that as we go forward? And I think we have just tremendous opportunity commercially, but you have to balance that more there, because if you can imagine here for our folks in the domestically, if you combine the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, and NHL into one, that's the fan avidity for these teams. And Sheffield's the 4th largest city in England. We have the oldest professional football ground in the world. We have the first team ever to be called United, Sheffield United. The rules of football were written in Sheffield. The first lit game or floodlit game ever was at Bramall Lane, where we play. And the first Premier League goal ever scored was scored by Sheffield United. We have this unbelievable history that we're stewards of. And how do we evolve that in a commercially responsible, in a fiscally responsible way, commercially, in a way that pays great homage, but also elevates that history, because that story hasn't really been told. That authenticity you can't recreate for the world's largest game. So But from an investment and the multiples for English or international football are decidedly much, much less than what we see here domestically in the US. When you talk about a transaction and multiples of revenue that are usually the basis of acquisition, the multiples there are still more fractional compared to what we see here for our major professional leagues, which really just goes to show you the vast potential that still exists internationally. And then the other thing that's different, unique about these teams that are different than what we have here domestically, we have, as many of you know in the industry listening, we'll have territorial rights. So generally a 75 or 150-mile radius. We're much more limited. We may have one-offs in the NFL now. They can go market to a country like the Steelers now with Ireland or the Chiefs with Germany. But with these teams in international, with the international teams in football, you have the entire world. So with the Cavs, I can recall us playing in China and Shanghai and Macau, playing the Orlando Magic and preseason games over there and seeing Manchester United stores. And so you have the ability from a commercial end, so core partnerships, merchandising, media, outside of your games. The games are much like the NFL, pulled together, and those rights are sold and team benefit. But beyond that, you have the ability, worldwide platform to activate your brand, which is really unique compared to what we have here domestically, and opens a whole nother range of plethora of opportunities. And then you mentioned about the National Basketball League and Larry Kesselman, who's just done an amazing job. He took a league that was basically bankrupt, destitute, and 10 years ago, and has turned it into a juggernaut. And their growth, their CAGR, or compound annual growth rate, is like 20% every year in terms of how it continues to grow and evolve. And in a country where soccer and Australian rules football and whatever are huge, and cricket's big and huge,
Yeah.
and so they've really now established themselves as a going entity. They've made an investment with the Women's National Basketball League too, to make that more, stabilize that, make it more profitable. And it's been terrific to learn about everything they're doing, and how we can apply some more principles and practices from the NBA to help accelerate their growth. And especially as from a talent perspective, Matthew Dellavedova was a key player for us at the Cavs and was the MVP of the playoffs last year. Even probably famous for the viral moment he gave the MVP award to somebody on the opposing team because his team did not win. But Andrew Bogut has a partner in a team, so just a tremendous amount of potential and tremendous investment opportunities over there. People always look at major opportunities here now, which are measured in billions. But that's what we touched on whether it be with minor league sports here or football or soccer over internationally, where there's opportunities. Wrexham is infamous, right, for fifth division team. In a lot of those cases, you have somebody, they're just looking for somebody to cover the operational deficit, to make
Right.
sure they have the capacity to do that. But you can grow that through promotion. And then with the National Basketball League, while their asset values have grown significantly, are still relatively attainable by any standard we have here domestically. So a lot of opportunity with what I call assets that are sustainable, have stick value, and again, going back to that question, hey, are we at the peak? We're not at the peak. It's even when you look at the Celtics transaction that's taking place, that's still, it's all that does is set the table for the next
Right.
level. And that's the Celtic transaction immediately reset the market for every NFL team, in
Right.
addition to what it did for the NBA.
I think the vast amount of opportunities that are out there is what's really interesting to me. And you mentioned Wrexham. Wrexham was such a, I mean, that's the perfect love story, right? It's
We'll be
Rob
playing them this.
McElhenney.
We'll be playing them this year. They made their way to the
You will
championship
be,
now.
yeah, you will be. I mean, they're the first. You gotta praise where credit is due, and they're the first team in the history of the football league to achieve 3 back-to-back promotions year after year. Of course, they've had good investment and backing from Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, but at the same time, they've not just done it for a quick turnaround. They've seen a genuine opportunity there, and there are plenty of other examples like that across the UK and internationally as well. When you One thing that I always find really interesting is going back to that point. There's a vast amount of opportunities out there. So when you're assessing a potential investment or a potential team or a franchise or whatever it might be, what are you trying to ascertain as to whether something is interesting enough for you to really go ahead and invest? And you mentioned Sheffield United is a great example, right? I didn't know some of those facts that you mentioned there, by the way. So that was helpful for me to learn.
You
First Premier
you
League
and
goal
the
scored.
vast majority of the world. It's like a hidden secret. It's like I asked our historian, I said, well, give me a list. I only gave you a few. And I'm like,
Yeah,
this is a story. You can't make this up, right? You
right.
cannot make this up. But anyways, you're not alone, Samir.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because our one of our co-founders, Scott Parsons, and he'll like the shout out here. He's a Notts County fan, and for anyone who doesn't know, Notts County are a League Two team now, I believe, maybe League One. Sorry, Scott, if they are a League One team. And he loves the fact that they were one of the first or oldest football club in history, and Juventus took their black and white jersey, and Juventus, right? A huge, very successful football club. So, each club has got their own DNA, is the point that I'm trying to make here, and their own story and their own background. When you're looking at potential investments, or if investors are out there assessing potential clubs or franchises to go and invest in or take over, what do you think are the kind of top 3 things that they should be thinking about and assessing when they look at those clubs as to whether that investment is worthwhile for them?
Well, first off, I think you have to look at the league. So if you're in a league, and obviously when you start to look at English football, they have such a legacy and operation in terms of what's going on there. But you want to be it's like buying into a neighborhood, right? You want to be in a neighborhood that's stable, because there's other ones that are not so much. But then you start to look at other factors like market. What market are you getting into? What's your facility situation like? Is that going to require incredible, because you have to look at not only the franchise investment and infrastructure, but you also have to look at facility investments too. And is that something that's, because in many cases that can be larger than your franchise investment in terms of the situation there. And then I guess I zero in on the commercial side a lot, because what's the revenue potential when these are, at the end of the day, these are businesses, and you would like to have them cash flow and make money. Is what's the opportunity there, and what other ancillary opportunities may exist. And I always look at situations almost like the worse it is, the better it is. If it's a scenario where all the ingredients are there we just talked about, but they just haven't done a good job of optimizing from a commercial end, that gives you tremendous potential and an upside about what can happen. And that doesn't necessarily happen overnight, because you have to infrastructure and leadership and a lot of other components, philosophy, systems, processes, all those type of things happen. So and now the beauty of our industry, which has really happened, I go back to DeBardlo, but Edward J. DeBardlo, but senior. But I just look at what's happened here in terms of our venues. How can you optimize them beyond just your core events, and what are those opportunities outside of that? From a real estate consideration end, we are economic engines, and we're at the anchors of those. So how does that activate opportunities from a real estate perspective? That whether it be with a development partner or otherwise, you can help activate as well. So there's just a lot of those different factors that confluence together, gives you a perspective script to be able to go out and make an evaluation of, is this an opportunity that well, first off too, is it going to be fun?
Yeah.
We're in an industry that's terrific. And by the way, one of the drivers for us as well is how we get to lift communities, how we impact people positively, and charities and good causes and all many, we just get to lift communities and unite communities like unlike anything else. And that's the beauty of sports. And then if you have all of those elements together and you can buy right and price, the investment level that you're getting in can make sense. Then you have hopefully the prospect of two things. One is as a business investment, one that'll have continued sustainable asset value growth and appreciation. But from a commercial side and a P&L and a cash flow end can be a profitable venture. But as people know out there in the industry, if you grow your top line revenue and your multiple is X, the higher your top line, then your multiple is higher. So it creates at a point in time when you do look to have an exit, there's even greater enhanced opportunity there. So it's not for the faint of heart too, because I will tell you this: if there's a lot of people who like to just the romanticize about getting involved in sports, and you can. I forget. I won't say this, but I remember one owner I talked to goes, "Yeah, a great way to become a millionaire from being a billionaire is owning a sports team." So you can definitely, depending on the situation, you can definitely lose a lot of money quickly.
Yeah.
Provided you, don't go in with your eyes wide open about what you need to do to get things done. And so,
Right.
it's not as just easy. Now, some cases are a little bit more foolproof, like the NFL, but in a lot of other cases, it's not always that easy.
You mentioned to me a few weeks ago when we connected, Len, I'm not sure if you recall, that not every deal or investment in sports has to start with a B, right? And you've given one, reference or quote that someone has said to you before in you can become a billionaire if you're a millionaire by owning a team, right? But there is also that layer down beneath. And would love to, I guess, get your take on, what makes the economics of some of those smaller or mid-tier sports properties attractive to potential investors that maybe don't have the billions to go out and buy the Boston Celtic acquisitions of the world, right? But there is that tier down, and you've obviously got a good example and story to share from what you've did with the Lake Erie Crushers.
Yeah, I think the fun part about it is there's so many opportunities in sports, and measured more in millions than billions, and that gamut, like just even we talked about with English football, or that could be frankly that exists in Spain and Italy and other locales as well in Europe with these different franchises. But if you apply those same disciplines, what we talked about, market, venue, ancillary opportunities, commercial trajectory, league, all those different elements, they can apply just in almost every situation. So in the case of what they've done with Wrexham, with that unbelievable, but that was a low seven-figure initial investment, right? To get involved. Now, don't get me wrong, they've put a tremendous amount of capital in that to build it where it is, and like you said, unprecedented what they've done. But there's many other situations like that where teams have been acquired for decidedly a lesser number trying to build it up. In the case of minor league sports in the U.S., and I've seen this with the American Hockey League, when we bought, prior to us buying then the Utah Grizzlies from Dave Elmore's group, Dave Elmore and his group back 2005, yeah. And we bought what became the Monsters, but prior to that, the AHL had, and this going back early 2000s,
Right.
you could have gotten an American Hockey League team for $1 million, paying $100,000 a year for 10 years. Think about that. So it's financed by the league. So the league, you basically had to pay $100,000 a year over 10 years, and you had an American Hockey League franchise. I will tell you now, it is dramatically different landscape. These are
Yeah.
major properties, worth tens of millions of dollars, and doing. I know when we got involved with the league, we were able to work with Dave Andrews, the commissioner, us and the San Antonio Spurs team, and we talked to him about creating a Teambo or NBA's Teambo model, team business operations model in the AHL, which they adopted and has been and getting exchange of information, and we're competing on the ice, but we're not competing for hot dogs or tickets, right? So if we grow this for everybody, it'll only build our asset value. And all those same principles and practices apply to other leagues. I mean, we're working with the Frontier League right now about how do we work more collaboratively together. Um, Much like Diamond is doing, when you own 40 teams, you can make that happen unilaterally.
Yeah.
And with other event activity, leveraging corporate partnerships over a greater platform, you have a lot more eyeballs aggregated, more, just all those things, efficiencies in terms of how you operate. And yeah, there's just a lot of those different opportunities that are out there at a lesser level. And if you do the right things, hire the right people, right systems, processes. So again, it's not um, easy. There's a lot of work involved. And I think, Samir, you've been in, our industry. People think this all happens magically at times.
Right.
One
Yeah.
one comment I used to get all the time was, "Hey, do you go to the games?" And I said, "If you had 20,000 people coming over to your house, would you be there?" So yeah, yeah. So,
It's a great
but
response, by the way.
anyways, that's it is a great industry. And then I'm involved in a lot of sports tech offerings right now. No Cap, which is a NIL solution. Working with Base Sports Group, which Mark Dvorak and his crew are doing a terrific job, which they're in the sports sponsorship space. And you think about these mega sports facilities, the Ripken Project or others, where they're focused on leagues and teams and tournaments and the like. But then how do you monetize it corporately? And they do a terrific job with that. And then also with Sponso. We have a terrific CEO in Mark Alba, but it's a phenomenal. It'd be something you'd be interested in seeing, but it's now basically a startup, but it would represent a corporate partnership transaction platform. So you think about what we're used to it in the secondary ticketing market.
Yeah.
You look at StockX and what they've done with sneakers and watches and the like, but this would be something with corporate partnership. So our CEO, Mark Alba, is doing a terrific job there. But anyways, there's all these different avenues to get involved, even on the sports tech side or sports, wearables, whatever the case may be. But I really like the team space, and because there's inherent stick value you start to build up with these leagues. The East Coast Hockey League's been a great example. They went from being a league that was challenged to now becoming a dominant player, and they're in that NHL development ecosystem below the AHL. So it's a great world to get involved with. I would just say for people who aren't in our industry looking to get involved, try to get someone who's been in our world, who's made a lot of mistakes over the years, that knows how to avoid, some of those pitfalls around the corner, so you don't have to learn the hard way. And you find out, wow, geez, I'm, many seven figures later, I'm just starting to turn the corner. You can save yourself a lot of heartache.
Right. And you mentioned some of the initiatives and the investment opportunities that you're still working on at the moment. You're quite deeply involved in bringing soccer to Cleveland with an MLS Next Pro team, potential NWSL team. Talk to us a little about that as well.
Well, first of all, just some terrific partners there leading the charge with Michael Murphy in particular and Nolan Gallagher. And I give Michael credit. He's a bulldog. Michael's been working at this now for, over 2 years, if longer, actually, but in earnest, really the last 2 years. And I was fortunate enough to get connected with Michael through a third friend here and become part of his group and been working and helping with that solution. But it's just crazy. Cleveland is, really the only top 50 market without a first or second division team, which is nuts. and for a market that has a great soccer pedigree and history. So right now, we were finalists for a National Women's Soccer League team, one of the final three between us, Cincinnati, and Denver. Unfortunately, Denver got the nod. Jessica, don't forget about us, but Jessica Berman, so she's terrific. I know Jessica from, from back in her National Lacrosse League days. Anyways, we have a Major League MLS Next franchise. We have a Women's Professional Soccer League franchise, and Michael's done a great job of forging a partnership with them and even playing a greater role in the WPSL overall. But they've become sort of set themselves up as the top development league when you look at the NWSL and also even the USL Super League. And we are working on a stadium here in downtown Cleveland that would be just south of Progressive Field. So I'm here at Rocket Arena. If I'm going this way, I'd see Progressive Field. And then just adjacent to that would be our site for building a 10,000 seat stadium. And so we're working through a public-private partnership right now, working through the city of Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, the state, and becoming a lot closer to reality. But we don't have a venue of this type in the market. Bringing soccer to Cleveland, which is way the time has passed so far that this should never have been barren without either of those type of franchises. Will be the first women's professional soccer team in the state of Ohio. So we're really excited about that and what that represents. And then we're looking at the stadium, much like we look at all these venues, right? Is multi-purpose. So we have high schools that want to play there for football. We have potential concert activity. We have other leagues like professional rugby league or other leagues of that nature that are looking, if we have the stadium, that they'd love to utilize that venue as well. So there's just a tremendous amount of potential there. But we're hopeful for that to come to fruition here in the next, month or two, to be able to start to launch that process of building a stadium and then ultimately launching those franchises.
Well, good luck, because it sounds
and another you talk about investment opportunities, another great space for investment. Those MLS Next Pro teams, the WPSL, that second tier of soccer is obviously phenomenal. And with the World Cup coming here in 26, and it's just going to have even more of a halo on it.
Club World Cup around the corner as well, which will be kicking off, I believe, this weekend, if I'm not mistaken,
right,
or very soon anyway. I'm for me anyway, Len. As you know, I'm a huge soccer fan, so seeing and hearing and feeling all of this come to life out here in the States is truly incredible. And I think, to the point that you referenced earlier, right, there's still so much more opportunity. We are not at the peak right now in sports. There is a lot of money still to invest. I think it is 50% of Premier League teams are now owned by US owners or US-led consortiums, right? So people are really noticing and seeing the opportunity out there, and it's even more pleasing to know and hear from someone like yourself that there's still opportunity out there. So for anyone that is considering or thinking about it, I think this is some sound advice to take on board. Last question for you, Len, before we wrap things up here, which feeds into the point I just made there. If you were advising a group of investors with capital to deploy in sports today, where would you tell them to look right now?
I'm biased on the team side, so I do. I think there's just something about, and it's personal to me, but people I talk to as well, who want to get invested, love being part of a team. We all played for teams. We all were part of team, and it's something to be, have a team and have an interest in a team beyond just being a fan. And if you can look at, first of all, I would just say from a major professional end, if you have those type of resources, I think directionally, again, they're only going in one direction. I think, Tim Lewicki and I were talking about this not too long ago about how we think, just even looking at the NHL, about how much more asset appreciation opportunity is there. So that's a league that's on a trajectory. I think Major League Baseball now is the rule changes have just been phenomenal. just a sport that I love a lot of all sports. Love basketball, hockey, football, baseball. It was you know it was laborious, right? To
Yeah.
to watch those games and just how it evolved and even the all the shifted infields and all these unnatural things. The game has become so much better. We're starting to see that in terms of ratings and attendance and all those factors. So I think youth participation has grown dramatically. So I think all those spaces from a major professional level are there, but I would say, probably NHL and Major League Baseball have greater. NBA and NFL are still juggernauts,
Right.
but those two spaces are growing significantly. We'll have upside. Soccer, we're seeing it too, but I think on that team side with minor league sports, I think for those people who want to get in and even learn the business, right, get involved at a much lower risk quotient, get into the right situations, I think that would be helpful. International football, there's a higher degree of complexity associated with that. You're not necessarily going to be in the market as often unless you're moving over there. And you're dealing with these assets that are beloved by their community. So there's a level of stewardship there that is at a greater degree and responsibility. So I think the opportunity is terrific, but you have to be serious about what you're doing. It is not
Yeah.
a casual investment, but the opportunities are vast. And if I can just say this too, making all this stuff happen, I've been very blessed to have a wife, and my wife Denise, who she was with me in the early days back when going back to my early indoor soccer days, pre Minnesota, and has lived through quite a bit. We've been able to raise four great kids and part of this, but it is a industry, as for those out there. I've had a chance to speak to a number of sports marketing classes, and I'll ask a question like, who wants a job where you work evenings, weekends, and holidays? Raise your hand. And they look at you like you're crazy. I'll say, well, guess what? Our biggest night's Saturday night. Our second biggest night's Friday night. Sunday afternoons are huge. Holidays are massive. And I remember when I had stepped away from the Cavs and we were down on my family in Pittsburgh for Easter, and it was a Sunday, and we're down there celebrating Easter, and my wife goes, if this was last year, we'd be at Rocket Arena right now for the Cavs Charlotte game. But these are huge days.
Yeah.
People have they have free time and are looking for things to do. But it's a great industry. We've gotten a lot better of managing that work-life balance in our industry, even though we're still got a road to go. But it's a great space, and couldn't be more excited. Whether it be you're working in the space, there's more opportunities, or investing, there's more opportunities than ever before.
Love it. Love it. Len, I think it's fair for me to say, well, first of all, congrats. What a story, what a journey, what a track record. You've gone into so many different teams and turned them around, achieved success, built something from scratch. And, it takes, as if anyone hasn't picked up from Len's discussions today, is a lot of work ethic, a lot of resilience, a lot of long days and late nights and everything in between. But it is what it takes to be a successful exec in this industry, and I think Len is a working example of that. So thank you for joining us today, and I've certainly learned a lot. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have done the same, and I'm excited to see what happens next. And I'll be following Sheffield United. My family are all from Liverpool, so I won't follow them too much, but I'll certainly be rooting and cheering for you guys on the sidelines. And good luck with all your endeavors.
Yeah, Samir, nothing would be better than being able to play Liverpool. So we'll work on that for hopefully, next season.
Yeah,
after
yeah.
here.
We
got to work our way to promotion. So there we go.
We'll put a pin in that. We'll come back to it at the appropriate time. Any final thoughts on your side?
Oh, Samir, it's been a great discussion. And I know I touched on a number of different names I've had the pleasure of working with in the past and have been part of my journey, but just a lot of great team members that I've had the ability to have had at least a small part of their world, but have gone on to unbelievable things like Shelly Kayette, who now runs the president of business ops for the Charlotte Hornets, or Hallie Yavich, who is the senior vice president of booking and marketing for Crypto Arena. and so much more out in LA, or Sezen Aksoy, who is SVP for global strategy for Access, and Molly Arbogast, who was with me at the Eagles and is now president, CEO of Point of View Sports Marketing. Josh Baker, he's Chief Revenue Officer and SVP of Global Partnerships with Professional Bull Riders. Leonard Bonacci, who's a regional VP for ASM Global. Sean Hunter, back in my Timberwolves days, now owner of the Chicago Dogs. And Don Smolinski, going back to my International Hockey League days, who I was able to get connected and be part of now, the president of the Philadelphia Eagles, and so many more. But just been very fortunate to have them as part of my journey, amongst many others who have just played a big role in my life, and I'm very appreciative.
But thank you, Len, and thanks to all our listeners again. Episode 2 will be coming out in a couple of weeks. Thanks for your time.
Great. Thanks, Samir. Always a pleasure talking to you, and for all those out there, great space here. So get engaged, check it out, and it's I can't speak of an industry that's more rewarding than our space, to be able to impact communities, impact people's lives, and have fun, and hopefully, have a good business as well.
There you have it. Thanks, folks. That was great, man.